So good morning or afternoon, and I want to welcome you all to day 3 of the Virtual Training Institute 8.0. As you come into the presentation, if you would take a moment just to introduce yourself in the chat, that would be great. Let us know who you are, where you're from. Just a reminder that in the chat, you'll need to select everyone so that all the participants can see your responses. Otherwise, it will only come to myself and to Kaylee. So before we get started, I want to take care of just a few quick housekeeping issues. Just want to remind you that this is in webinar format, so you will not be able to unmute yourself. That feature has been disabled. If you want to make a comment or ask a question, go ahead and use the chat feature. Want to also remind you that your proof of participation will come to you approximately 24 hours after the end of this session. It will come directly from Zoom. And when the session ends, you will get it should pop up an evaluation. So if you could just take a few minutes to give some feedback for this presentation. And I am going to go ahead and launch a poll so that we know who is with us. So if you could just take a second to tell us what role you have in adult education, that would be great. I'm just going to give a couple more seconds for people to respond. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. And as we might expect, the majority are instructors with a few instructional specialists, and then some of the other roles. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing this, and I will stop sharing my screen. And I'm going to turn this over to Kaylee Boris, who is giving us a presentation on how mental health impacts student learning.
All right, thanks, Ramona. Hi, guys. My name is Kaylee Boris, and I'm coming from Howard Community College. Thanks for having me back at VTI again this year, Ramona. It's always really fun to try to attend as many sessions as possible. I know I really get a lot out of them. So we're going to be talking about how mental health impacts student learning today. I did put a QR code on my first screen so that if you want to get the notes right away, you can take a little screenshot of that and have it on your phone just to save for later. I like to get them right away, so I thought maybe there's some other people out there like me. So please go ahead and take that, and we're going to get started. I just wanted to preface it by saying I am not a medical expert or a psychologist or anybody that really has any professional opinion on this topic. I am just simply an instructor here to share what I've learned with other instructors, just because we've all faced some of the same issues and had some students who we wanted to help but didn't maybe know how to. I've attended a couple other sessions, so some of this information is coming from some of the things I learned at those sessions. And I've also found some new information as well. But before we dive in, I have this little screen I need to read out loud to everyone. It just says, the content or opinions expressed in this presentation do not necessarily reflect or present the views, positions, or policies of the Maryland Department of Labor, nor does the mention of trade names, commercial products, or organizations imply an official endorsement by the Maryland Department of Labor. All right. So real quick before we get started, since we're talking about mental health and moods and attitudes a little bit today, I want you to take a look at these GIFs and pick out which one you think best describes your current mood today. Go ahead and put it in the chat. I'm definitely feeling 6 today. That's me. Got a little fallen over guy. All right, we've got all kinds of things coming in. I'm seeing a lot of fives and a lot of fours today. A lot of you are like, no, some threes. I like the fours because you're just kind of coasting along. All right, I love it. I did not create this. Somebody else at Howard Community College made these and they're super cool. So just thought I'd share that with you all today. All right, let's move on. So today, here's our basic agenda. We're going to need to go through some statistics. Then we'll talk about some definitions of some of the most common types of mental health challenges. And then we're going to talk about what that means for us as instructors or instructional specialists who are supporting instructors, how we can make sure that our programs and our classrooms are safe places where people feel valued. So first, we're going to get into some stats. I'm going to go through these kind of fast, but hopefully that'll give you a little overview of what things currently look like in Maryland. This is a very Maryland-centered presentation today, but of course, most of this information can be applicable to anybody. So I found some various stats for this first one, but somewhere between 1 in 4 Americans and 1 in 5 Americans experience mental health challenges per year. That's a lot whenever we think about 20 to 25%. 56% of American adults with mental health illnesses do not access treatment. So whether you have some type of mental health illness or not, it seems like most of the time people aren't getting treated for it. And 40 million Americans are affected by anxiety. Again, this could be even higher. These are just the numbers that we presently have based on who has reported what they have reported. If we look at rates among states, you can see that Maryland's kind of in the middle compared to some other states. The darker the color, the higher the rate of mental health illness. And this comes from a state ranking from World Population Review. They just look at different rankings between different places in the world. Looks like Virginia, though, is pretty high, and we're not that far away from there. So I think you'll see when we get to the maps here in a moment that we're going to see some different types of statistics, and some of them don't necessarily always correlate with the other ones. So I've recently found this really cool site. Some of you may have seen this before, but I also teach group fitness at the Y, and we recently had a staff meeting where the presenter was talking about this site called Places. You can go here and you can narrow down different types of illnesses that affect people in the United States, and it shows you county by county, city by city, what those different illnesses look like. So we're going to look at it a little bit today. I do have everything linked in my presentation. So if you took that little QR code earlier, you'll be able to get that right away. But what I did was I took this area here where we're going to focus on depression, and I looked at some rates of depression in the state of Maryland. So this is what it looks like in the entire country for all of the illnesses that pop up. But when we narrow it down to just depression, we have some stats that show what the different places around us look like. So this is kind of Maryland as a whole. If we wanted to, spotlight in here a little bit, we can kind of see the state as a whole if we outline it here. And you can see we have a pretty vast scale as far as depression rates go in our state. We have some counties that are extremely dark, and then we have other areas that are very light. Over here on the side, you can see how it compares to the national average. This Places site gets their data from the last census that was held in the United States, and it takes that data, combines it with some stats from the CDC, and that's how they come up with all of these numbers. So know that all of these things are based on those recent statistics. I'm going to go through some sections of Maryland just to sort of point out and zone in on your area. And again, this is where I'm going to go kind of fast. So we've got our western part of the state, and we can see over here near Hagerstown, we're sort of bumping into West Virginia a little bit where things are a bit darker. So this is showing us that some of our areas in Western Maryland are right about the national average, and some are a little bit higher than the national average, which is about 25% for being diagnosed with depression. So this is just talking about having that official diagnosis. Whenever we look into Northern Maryland, again, we see a pretty colorful snapshot up here. We see some places that are lighter, but we also see some areas that are very dark. There are some areas around the city, as well as you get a little bit further up here in the northeast of Maryland. It's a little bit darker in those sections. Here's closer to the city, and as well as zooming in around Annapolis. A little bit of Howard County is in there as well for my HOCO people. A little bit of Montgomery County. And then we've got our Eastern Shore over here. And I would have to say, if I look at the depression stats, it does appear to me as an observer that the Eastern Shore looks like it has maybe a little bit more of a darker concentration than some other areas. So if you would like to look at that later, again, everything's linked up, so you can check that out. I just think it's helpful information to know what we're working with and what to expect in the area in which we live. I've got our first activity lined up for us today. I want you guys to really make this experience today your own. So there's going to be a couple times where we break out and do some things on our own. I have 2 links here, and I will put them both in the chat. The first link that I'm going to put in the chat, it goes to an infographic sheet. So if you're somebody who really likes pictures, you're going to want to click on the first link. If you're somebody who really, let me go back. Somebody who really likes math, you're going to want to click on the second link. So the first link is pictures, and it's a lot of different stats about mental health. The second link I'm posting is a lot of graphs, charts, statistics, and it even talks about things like suicide rates and drug rates. So I'd like you to take a look at those. And what I want you to do is quickly skim it. I'm going to give you like three minutes just to kind of do your own adventure, choose your own adventure kind of learning here. I'd love for you to post something in the chat that you didn't know before that you learned from one of those 2 links. You pick. 3 minutes. Go. Oh, sorry. I just put them to the panelists. Let me change it. I'll do that again. I didn't realize mine went to the, there we go. There's the first link. Second link coming through. Thank you for those of you who told me that. You should see them now. All right, I'll give you guys about 1.5 more minutes to find something cool. You can always look at these a little bit more later. Just want to get your brains thinking about mental health a little bit first. And post your cool fact or something you learned in the chat box whenever you're ready. And as you finish up, I'm going to go to my next screen just so you can read through these fun little memes while you wait for the rest of us. All right, I'm seeing a couple things come through the chat. A lot of people talking about some of the students in youth and juvenile justice systems have mental health conditions. 7 out of 10, that's very high. 1 out of 4 with a serious mental illness have been arrested. 6,000 plus homeless in Maryland. 1 in 4 have a serious mental illness. Yes, they are very high. I agree. That's why I thought these visuals really speak. Cost of treatment, that is for sure. I never realized how expensive it was until I was looking into it for one of my kids, some therapy sessions. And I was like so surprised at the prices and how little is covered, unfortunately. Yes, I would love to know too, compared with COVID before and after. And I'm sure, Betsy, that that's something that people are still thinking about. I bet whenever we get our next census done, that we'll get some more information about how that census compares to the one before. Yeah, a lot of you talking about the juvenile justice, high school dropouts. Yes, students with depression are 2 times more likely to drop out of high school. All right, you guys are learning some great things. So I got us onto our next screen. I thought I'd add in some fun little memes here that I found on an Instagram site called My Therapist Says, and it's somebody I follow. They always have pretty interesting things. But I think we can all relate to these things, right? I bet if we all read one of these, we would be like, oh, yeah, that's me. I could probably say all three of these are me sometimes. But what we're going to dive into today is that it becomes a problem when it's us all the time. That's when we really dig into mental health, not just being how we're feeling in the moment or in the day, but when those patterns carry over into our lives in ways that make us hard for us to learn and just be present. So let's talk about some definitions of what mental health is exactly. We'll also get into a little bit with trauma today. But before we do that, what I want you to do, I'm going to give us a little jam here to get us started thinking and sharing some more. I want you to think about your classroom. Have you ever had a student, without knowing anything really about mental illness, have you ever had a student in your classroom who you maybe suspected had some type of mental health challenge going on? And I want you to just make a quick note in the jam, which is just now in the chat, about what behaviors or patterns you saw in that student. So go ahead and take 1 minute, add a little sticky note. If you've never used Jamboard, you can do it 2 ways. The easiest way is to click on the sticky note and you can type something and then hit save, or just click off of it and then it'll allow you to put that note on the Jamboard. I'm seeing some things come through: poor listening, not motivated, being withdrawn. Yes, not stopping, not submitting assignments, very distractible. Hearing voices. I see that one back there. That is an interesting one. I see that a couple times. Explaining things a few times before they understood. And yeah, that can be a lot of us sometimes, but definitely if it's an abnormal amount. Erratic decision making. I have experienced that in my class before too, where I've had some students who are having a hard time thinking rationally. Never turn in assignments. Yeah. And I think like if we really take a look at this, we can all agree that sometimes this is all of our students, right? But what we're going to talk about today is when these things are not just every now and then, when they are all the time. Man, you guys got a lot of stuff. We must really need this today. Oh, I don't know what just happened. Somehow they all got deleted. We have a ghost in our presentation today. All right, let's move on. So our definition of mental illness, coming from psychiatry.org, says mental illnesses are health conditions involving changes in emotion, thinking, or behavior, or a combination of these. Mental illnesses can be associated with distress and or problems functioning in social, work, or family activities. So to take a little bit step further past that, we're going to look at what makes mental illness distinguished from just having a bad day. Because we all have times where we might feel a little off or maybe not ourselves. But here are the things that would not be considered normal as far as a psychologist would go. So having emotional distress over an extended period of time, more than 2 weeks, being in distress, the distress significantly interferes with the person's ability to function. I'm talking about they can't get out of bed, they're having a hard time eating, or maybe they're not eating when they should be. They might be missing class or work frequently. Like maybe all of a sudden they drop off the face of the earth, you never hear from them again. Sometimes we're just being ghosted, but sometimes there's probably something else going on. This is the key down here for me. The symptoms are present more days than not. So we see all of those things we just put in our Jamboard sometimes with our students, but when we're seeing them more frequently or more happening when they're not, that's when we need to be a little bit more concerned. Another thing that plays a part here is trauma, because sometimes it's not a condition that you're necessarily born with or that maybe runs in your family. Sometimes an event happens in your life and that impacts you to the point of giving you some type of mental health challenge. We all know that person. We could probably all think about somebody in our lives. Please don't put names in the chat, but somebody who had something just horrific happen to them and they were never the same. That's what we think about when we think about trauma. So you can see over here to the right that people who experience trauma really are more at risk for many things. The statistics are a little bit jarring whenever you look at that. But this is whenever they are exposed to something that is just so disturbing or life-threatening that it really affects them as a human being. It impacts every little thing about them physically, spiritually, emotionally, mentally. It impacts their learning. So we're going to get into both of these types of things today, whether the mental health challenge is something that they might be born with or that they have or something that's developed over time versus something happens to them. Somebody also notes, I think it's important to note high functioning depression or when we don't normally see these symptoms, which is also common in instructors as well as students. Yes, that is totally true. That is something we'll talk about later too, is just keeping ourselves healthy as well. So if you have this, the slides that I gave you the QR code for earlier, this is all linked up in here if you want to learn more about any of these later. But this information on here comes from the DSM, which is what we know, people in the medical field who do things in brain research or in psychology or in that area, they use to diagnose things like depression and anxiety and PTSD. So these are some of the things that they note that would be looked for to diagnose someone with depression. They need to have at least 4 of these symptoms, and it has to be for 2 or more weeks. Let you take a little look at that. Anxiety, the same thing over here. So I was reading a lot about anxiety, and it was interesting because they said in anxiety that the worries are often perceived worries, that a lot of the time those worries don't even happen. And 90% of what the people are worrying about actually never comes into fruition. But it's the constantly thinking about the things that could happen that are causing you to have issues like sleep disturbance or mood changes or feeling edgy. And a lot of times this can lead to things like panic attacks, where somebody is having triggers that are setting them off into a place where they are not mentally healthy at that moment. And then PTSD, a normal reaction to an abnormal event. Symptoms are for more than a month. So this might have been that they were exposed to something, maybe it happened to them or they saw something. They might be shut down emotionally because they're left with some images in their brain. They might have persistent negative thoughts about how they are perceived in the world or how others are to them. So we can all probably think of some people, and maybe it's even one of us, whenever we think about these different conditions. And again, I'm not a medical expert. So if you want to get the medical expert's opinion about any of these, please click on these links later so you can learn more about them. So I looked at a little bit about how stress also impacts our brain, because stress and trauma, they're all working together negatively against our brain. And sometimes stress is like a good thing. Like sometimes when we're stressed, it really helps us to dive deeply into something and work really hard to get something done. The problem is when it's chronic stress. When it's stress that's happening repeatedly, our body is always in this cycle where it just cannot get ahead. When we're constantly stressed out, we have extra cortisol, and that extra cortisol is interfering with our learning. As you can see, some of our brain ends up getting damaged over time. It can also mess with our hormones in our body that can cause some hormone instability. And I found this last line interesting. Prefrontal cortex can be underdeveloped, causing poor judgments, impulsivity, executive functioning troubles, and learning difficulties. I feel like this area really I really feel that in my heart when I think about some of my students. And when I think about even some of my children, like it's it's hard when we see these things happening to somebody on a daily basis and we know that they can't control it. So what we're going to talk more about today is how we can best support the people who are going through these things. Here's a little bit more about that. And basically, what I learned was if you're constantly in this stress brain loop where you're constantly chronically stressed out and your body is responding, you're going to be affected in so many different ways. You might get less sleep. If you get less sleep, you're going to have mood swings and be edgier. If you're having mood swings and being edgier, you might not feel like eating. Maybe you're hungry all the time because you're stressed. So it can appear differently in different types of people. But all in all of these things down here go down. They get worse for us, like our attention, our perception, our short-term memory, our learning, and our word finding. Have you ever had a day where you're teaching and you didn't sleep so great the night before and you can't find your words? Like, does this just happen to me or does this happen to other people too? Because I know if I'm like really stressed and didn't sleep well, I'm like, what is that word? I know it's right there on the tip of my tongue. So I think like we can all relate to see sometimes. It's when it's our every day. We got another jam here. Let's take a moment. We're going to hop into page number 2. It's the same Jamboard link as before, but it's the second page of the link. So you can click the little arrow up here at the top, and that'll allow you to get into the Jamboard again. We're going to go to section 2, and there's a question up here. So now I want us to think about some of those stressors, because we just talked about how stress impacts our students. What are some stressors that they might experience inside our program or outside of our program? All right, I'm seeing some things come through. Money, being homeless, absolutely. Money is a big one. Financial security. I definitely hear that one from students. Food insecurity. Money, 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 money. Family. Oh, immigration status. Yes. Did not think about that one, but yes, absolutely. Family issues I see in the chat. If the chat works better for you, I love it. Not being placed at the right class level. That is interesting. We do want our students to feel successful. So it's so important. That placement piece is so important. Perception that they don't have the ability to do the work. Absolutely. You guys have great ideas. Yeah, overworked. I can't tell you how many times I talk to my students and I ask them what they did over the weekend, and they're just working all the time, trying to get ahead of the game because money issues. All right, you guys keep putting those great ideas in there. I'm going to keep moving us along. So we talked a little bit about some of the things that we see in our class. So these are some things that we would want to draw some attention to, or maybe talk to someone else about if it's something that, thanks Ramona, something that we're seeing. Oh yeah, thanks. I see it. You got that link in there. Some things that we might be seeing happening every day. So a lot of these things you guys already mentioned. These might be some things that if they're feeling stressed out or if they're going through a mental health challenge, you might hear them talking about, like being hopeless, or maybe you see them being jittery or jumpy. So whether it's a stressor in their life or something that is a mental health challenge for them on the regular, these are all things that we want to look for and just keep an eye on so that we can make sure we're supporting our students. All right. Let's talk about what we can do with it. So we learned a little bit about what it looks like, what students might be facing. Let's talk about what we can do about it, because sometimes we feel helpless and hopeless, right? We're just like, I have a student and I don't know what to do with them. My hands are tied as an instructor. I can't force them to go to therapy. Like I can't give them money to go do all these things. What can we do? So let's focus on some of that. I found a lot of great strategies. Some of these aren't going to be new to you, but what I thought we would do is we would post some here. We'll talk about a few, we'll evaluate our programs, and then we'll share at the end if we have some other great ideas too, because we all want to be here for one another. So we all know relationships are key and providing a safe, consistent, predictable environment for students. What's a way that we can make sure our environment's predictable for our students? Anybody have an idea they could put in the chat, like something that you do to keep it consistent for them? Yeah, clear communications, regular activities, routine, routine, routine. Yes, I do, we do, you do. I love that model. I'm seeing routine over and over and over again. Absolutely. Have a routine. Put your agenda up, whether it's on your board or on your slides. That way they know what's expected of them. Having clear rules and expectations. I don't know about you guys, but sometimes I get a student who maybe missed the first day of class. So making sure that we're also making sure that we go back and revisit those expectations from time to time, because all of our students can benefit from hearing them over again. Allowing brain breaks. You might have an actual brain break activity that you do, or maybe you just tell your students, hey, if you need to go get a drink from the water fountain and come back to class, go get a drink from the water fountain and come back to class. Whatever it is that they might need just to reset their learning and their attention. Pointing out what they're doing well. I know some of us, this comes naturally of thinking about what they can do well, but all of our students can benefit from being told what is going really well with them. We don't know what they're hearing at home. We don't know the voices that are in their head, but we can be a voice that they hear in their heads, telling them what they can do. This is something maybe for a little more of an extreme case. If you have a student who really struggles, or maybe you just need to set a calm tone in your class. I recently found this virtual calming room, and it's this cool site where you can go and they have different music and different visuals to sort of help set the tone in your class. It's being a little slow loading here, but I'll tell you a little bit about it. There's also some breathing activities on here. So if you do teach students with special needs, or if you do have some students who might need a little bit more support with calming and things like that, this is a super cool site. There's some different YouTube sound clips here. There's some soothing piano music, some harps, things like that. And these just link to YouTube videos, basically. There's also some visuals. I thought this was super cool. So if you know that you have some anxious students in your room, there's some cool visuals again. These link just to YouTube, but there's like a glitter bottle thing. There's relaxing music and candles that light up, and it's literally a video of a candle burning. So some of these things seem maybe a little bit weird, but some of your students might really need something like this. So this is an example of the candle. So again, you might not all need something like this, but if you do, you have it. So I'll just throw this link in the chat box just so you have it right away if you want it. Maybe you need this today. Let's go to the next thing. Peer support and collaboration. So again, establishing that comfortable, warm atmosphere where your students feel like they know the other students, and also where they're not afraid to fail. Like maybe they have failed a lot in their past and they think that's a terrible thing, but you might be the first teacher who's like, you know what? When we don't do well at something, that's a learning opportunity. So seizing those moments where it's okay to not be okay, and it's okay to not know something. And I think just like as an instructor, having the humility to say to our classes, you know what, I don't know the answer to that. Let's Google it together. Like we had something come up in class last week and I stopped what I was doing, and we literally like found a YouTube video demonstrating the concept, and then we did a little experiment. It took us 3 minutes, but in that tiny 3 minutes, it explained the questions that the student had. It also showed them that I don't know everything, because I never want to let them think that about me. But it also was an opportunity for them to really construct their own learning based on what they needed that day. So don't be perfect. Let them see you, be you. And empowerment, voice, and choice. We know our students thrive on being able to pick activities. So maybe you have 3 science activities planned and you're going to let them pick one with the same learning concept. Teach them what they can and cannot control. This might be one of those little side conversations you have with a student, but it also might be you talking to yourself when you're having a bad day. Like yesterday, I was really stressed out about something. So like I went into my class and I was like, guys, I'm really stressed out about this big training that I have this weekend and I haven't been sleeping well. But you know what? Like, we're here to learn. We're going to have a great day. So we got through our lesson. We had fun. I didn't even think about my weekend. So just showing them that, like, sometimes it's okay to not be okay, but you still got to do what you got to do. Like, that can be really helpful for them. Integrating things like art, music, storytelling, video, journaling, just to help access different parts of the brain, but also is just fun, right? Like, we all know that we love to be in a class where we get to have fun. Nobody likes being boring. Again, be real about your feelings. And then this last one here, integrating the topic of stress into classroom teaching. Sometimes great conversation can come just from a reading passage. So I do have some instructor content at the end that I'm going to show you guys that I did not create, but I found. You might want to let people know, like, ahead of time, if you're going to talk about mental health or stress or suicide or like any of those topics, just as a sort of trigger warning. That way, if there is a student in there who just can benefit from knowing that, that they are aware of that. We got a lot more strategies here. And if you guys have some, I'd love for you to put them in the chat too. Build in reminders for things. So you might have a system that you use. Maybe you use the Remind app. Maybe you're using Canvas. Maybe you're using Google Classroom. Whatever it is to communicate with your students so that they know the expectations. If there's a schedule change, if there's an assignment coming up, the more clear that we can be, the better headspace we're all going to be in, us and our students. Because I don't know about you guys, but if I'm feeling disorganized and messy, my brain is feeling disorganized and messy. So I love it when we can help our students be organized by organizing ourselves. Giving them examples and models are always great things to do. Integrating the topic of mental health. So this goes back to stress. I'm going to show you guys a little bit of resources later. This is one I learned from one of the other trainings that I went to. It might have been the ones through the LCMC. LCMC? I might have said that wrong. But easy is a 4-letter word. I never really thought about this, but 4-letter words, like we say, like swear words, 4-letter words. Easy is a 4-letter word. And that means that we should never say something is easy as an instructor, because what might be easy in our mind might not be easy to our learners. And that might make them think, well, I'm stupid because my teacher said this is supposed to be easy and I don't get it. So that can really help. That could really impact their thinking about themselves if we're saying things are easy. And I've caught myself saying this before. So I'm really trying to get better and not say that this will be easy, because you just never know. Avoid looming and hovering behind students. This one sort of relates to the trauma situation. Like, we don't know what our students have been through or what's happened to them before. So this is something else I've been trying to really work on this semester, is just making sure that I'm not standing right behind my students and making them feel uncomfortable. Like, did you ever have that teacher in school who would just kind of stand there and look down at your paper? And I don't know about you guys, but the whole time they're standing there, I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I doing wrong? I'm totally doing this wrong. I know I'm messing this up. Like, those are the things that start to go on in my brain. So I try to think about that now when I'm with my students, like, hey, I don't want to be causing them any more anxiety. So I just try to rotate amongst the room instead, so that hopefully I can see what they're doing and they're not feeling as stressed out about it. And then keep on learning. So this is a big one for me. Like, I started this presentation. I'm not an expert in this. I don't know all the answers. So if you hear me say something that you disagree with, I'm okay with you putting that in the chat box. I'm just here to keep learning. So if there's something that you find or research that you have found that you love, I'd love for you to share that in the chat box too. I want this to be all about us helping one another. So a moment ago, I mentioned some resources that I had for instructors. And again, I'll put the QR code back up at the end of this session in case you want it. But some of you probably have heard of like the Marshall Reading Program before. If you're an ABE language arts instructor, I know you've used it. But they actually have a lot of passages that relate to stress and mental health. And I thought, like, man, if I could get some of these things into my class, like, what conversations might I be able to have with my students? Like, what things might they open up to me about? Or what might they feel is normalized to them because of their experience in class? Like this one, pregnancy and depression, it's a reading passage and it talks about postpartum depression. And like, we don't know which of our students have been through something like that. Maybe we have been through that before. And I think it's like a great time to not only teach our students because we're giving them a reading passage and it's got questions and it has vocabulary practice and it has comprehension check, which is awesome. But it also might lead to a great conversation that you can have with them where you can be transparent and they can be transparent with you. So again, use these tools to help your students process through things that they might be going through, but also to just get to know them better. Like I know I've had students share things that otherwise wouldn't have come up because of something we were doing in class that day. I found these cool, as far as math goes, I've got a couple sources here for you. There's a mandala math, which is kind of soothing. I did find a student example here, but these are some, it's a teachers pay teachers store. It's not me. I wish it wasn't because then I'd be making lots of money on these. But I just gave you guys a little sample because I paid for it. So I didn't want to like share this teacher's content with everybody. But you put your name in, you answer the algebra question, and then it's actually going to color in the mandala for you. So it's, first of all, it's just fun, but this might be like a little soothing if you have students who just need that color or that fun in their lives, who hate drill and repetition. They have a bunch of these for different things. You guys have probably seen how like coloring can be soothing for people. This is just another visual to think about and sort of set your mind on, take a little of that math anxiety edge off. And then GED, I shared this in another VTI session that I did in the past, but GED came up with these math, attitude, and disposition questions before, which I think are really nice to use as discussion in your class or as a journaling activity because we all know we've got math students who are terrified of the GED math test. And sometimes it's just a little bit of nervousness, but sometimes it's some serious test anxiety. And I don't know about you guys, but sometimes the more I talk about something or talk to other people about something and hear, oh, they feel the same way as me about this thing, it helps me feel maybe a little less stressed about it, or maybe not less stressed, but maybe more normal because I'm not the only one feeling that way. So sometimes these conversations can just really be good for community building, but also for that like anxiety about math piece. Um, Something that HCC has, I just figured I'd show this to you. I don't know that every program has something like this, so I'm just sharing what we have. This is for our students only, but at HCC, our students can actually receive a lot of things for free with their student ID. And one of those things that they can get for free are some counseling at no cost. Again, it's not like long-term counseling, but they can get some short-term counseling. So look into whatever program you work with and see like, are there things that our students could be getting? And if so, figure out how to get them into that because we know that money especially can be a barrier for our students, and our students can get $10 dental services. They can get free bus passes. Like they really have, there's a family study room. Like there's really a lot that they can do with their student IDs. So talk to your supervisors, instructors, whoever is in charge of you, and see if your students can benefit from some of these things as well. Because I wouldn't have known about this if my boss didn't push for some of these things and communicate it to us. So there's some mental health videos in here. I did put in the link to these mood meters that I started with for the session today. Again, I didn't make them, but it might be a fun way to just build some class community, get the conversations going in your class. They do come from another instructor at HCC. There are some SEL lessons, social emotional learning. There's an article I found about stress reduction. These videos are fantastic. I chose to not show them today. When I taught this session with our instructors at HCC, I had 2 hours. So we had a little more time to like do fun stuff like watch videos. But these are linked in here if you want to do them. And I also put in the full presentations from the 2 sessions that inspired me for this session. But we're not done yet. I just wanted to make sure I showed you some of these instructor resources because you might want to deep dive into some of them today. But we're going to do one more thing. To sort of sum up everything today, what I want us to think about is how are we currently doing? So what's going to happen is I'm going to put another link in the chat. This will prompt you to make a copy. So let me load this so I can show you how it works. So it'll come up with this. It'll say copy document, mental health environment evaluation. And what you can do is make your own copy. This will show up in your Google Drive. So you will always have access to it. And I want you to think about your program or your classroom. And this comes from, it was inspired by something else that I found specifically for teaching adult learners. But I sort of adapted it to make it shorter and a little bit more visual for all of us to go through. You can do this a couple ways. If you really want to slide all these emojis over to the boxes, you can. So yes, my room is clean and well lit. Maybe it is. No, it's definitely not clean and well lit. Or you can just do a simple yes, no. Nobody will see these answers but you. You should be able to edit it once you make your copy. So you can go through some of these questions, put in little Y's and N's. Are supplies organized? Yes. So some of these are talking about the learning environment. We have a page to evaluate your current program policies and maybe your classroom routines. There's another one. There's classroom content. So like things like, do you communicate with your students in a caring way? I hope we all say yes. And then we've got some very small things like, do we have the confidence to respond to an intense emotional moment that might arise in the class? So when I think of something like that, I think about, like, I don't know if you guys do this. Sometimes I think about things that might happen or things that have happened in the past with my class. And I think about, okay, if that happened today, what would I do about it? Or where's the nearest emergency phone? So just thinking about stuff like that. Even something I've noticed that I have done this semester and one of my colleagues is also doing, I can't find it. I know it's in here somewhere. There is something like our hard candies gum or cinnamon candies available for quick sensory stimulation. We both have our little candy bowls out for now for our students. And I'll tell you what, it's so great when I see my students starting to drift off to be like, yes, you need some positive mental health support today. Have a, I don't say that to them, but I'm like, here, I can see you're drifting. Why don't you take a piece of chocolate or take a mint? So you guys can make a copy of this. I'm going to give you a few minutes to go through it on your own. I'll put it in the chat here. I'll put the QR code up again too. I'll go back to the beginning later. So that link is there. Oh, thank you. So Betsy put this in here. She recently became trained as a mental health first aider and found this to be helpful. I highly recommend you can search where nearby trainings are being offered. I'm going to open that link up. That looks cool. So go ahead, make your copy of your evaluation. I want you to think through those things. I'll give you about 1 minute per slide to quickly evaluate your program. I'll stop my share here for a minute just to make it less confusing for you. So go ahead and evaluate, take about 5 minutes, and then we'll end with one more activity. If you only teach online, I would just go through the ones that you can answer. Like obviously you don't have a classroom that might be neat, but you do set a class vibe. So you can still think about like your personality, your attitudes. Do you have an agenda posted for your students? Maybe you have music playing sometimes. Like things like that. Just think about how you could make that online environment feel supportive for them. So that's a great question. Take about 3 more minutes. If you finish early, you can work on our final Jamboard question. What's something that you learned that you would like to try in your class? Again, no rush. For us so we can see what you want to try out. Hi, Zafine. I see you on there. All right, looks like a lot of you guys are liking the virtual calming room, using the reading passages, relaxing activities, and options for what to do if they need to step out. Yeah, thinking about what they might need to do. Like maybe you just send them, be like, hey, I noticed you're looking a little tense. Why don't you run to the bathroom, come right back? You don't even need to say, I noticed you're looking tense. You can just say, hey, you look a little frustrated, or hey, maybe you should go to the bathroom, then come right back. Like you don't have to point out what you're seeing. Sometimes just you got to know your students and know how to speak to them. Obviously, we all do, but just having an out for them if they need a little wiggle break. We all need a little wiggle break sometimes. Music. Yeah, I know some instructors who have music playing in their virtual classes. We've got an instructor, she teaches our nighttime GED language arts prep class. And I know she starts her class with music, which I love. I think that's super cool. Even though she's teaching online, she's still setting a great vibe. A coffee station. I want to come to your classroom. Who has a coffee station? That sounds awesome. All right, I want to share my screen one last time. You guys have great ideas. Look at all these ideas. Classroom climate has an impact on students. Absolutely. The idea of what an instructor can do, especially don't use the word easy. Yeah, I even find myself like, if I'm if I'm teaching, like I mentioned earlier, I teach some group fitness classes now too. And I try to avoid it when I'm teaching that too, because just because something might be physically easy for us doesn't mean everybody can do it. So whether it's like writing activity, a math activity, avoiding that easy word. All right, I wanted to end this presentation with a research article, which seems like a weird way to end, but I found this abstract to be interesting. And what it tells us is they had done a study to see how the COVID, somebody had mentioned earlier, the COVID-19 and like how that might have impacted things. So this was assessing non-traditional students, so adult learners in their mental health and well-being after COVID. I came upon this article from 2022 from Adult Education Quarterly. And something that they found, this was really interesting. So I'm just going to read it. It says, statistical analyses found that participants reported higher levels of depression, anxiety, sleep disturbances, and insomnia, with corresponding lower levels of well-being across all students compared with pre-pandemic levels. This is the big thing. Results showed that while non-traditional students indicated an increased number of life stressors during the pandemic compared with their traditional peers, non-traditional students also demonstrated higher levels of resilience. Non-traditional students appear to be more successful at managing stressful life events due to the increased resilience that comes with age and experience, which can better prepare them to persevere and overcome challenges. This is so cool. Like, yes, we've all been impacted. We all have things that have been hard, especially since the pandemic. Our lives were all flipped upside down. I'm quoting the Fresh Prince right now. But the truth is, this article has found that our students also are super resilient. And I think if we were honest with ourselves, we would probably agree with that for the most part. Our students have been through so much. We know they've been through, a lot of them have been through trauma. We know a lot of them had to quit school for a reason that they wish they didn't have to go through. But it's finding that maybe because of some of the circumstances they're in, whether they're financial or whether it's food insecurity or whatever stressors are going on, they do tend to be more resilient. So thinking about that does give me a lot of hope. And I wanted to share that little bit of hope with you guys at the end too. That is the conclusion of my presentation. I'm going to put this link, I'll put this QR code back up here in case you wanted to snap it. And I can also put the slideshow in the chat box. But if you guys had anything else you wanted to ask, please put your questions in the chat. Yes, I will give you the link. So let me bring that back up. My eyes keep fading into this background, Ramona. It's super creepy. I don't know why. All right, well, thank you guys so much. I'm working on getting that link as soon as my computer will cooperate with me here. Or maybe Ramona might have it, I'm not sure. But I'll get that in there as soon as I can.
It actually might be faster for you to do it because I would have to do a little searching for it.
That's all right. I finally got it to come up. So we should be
Great,
good now.
thank you.
Yeah. Thank you
So-
guys. Have a great rest of your day.
So on behalf of the
Okay.
Maryland Department of Labor, I would like to thank Kaylee. That was a great presentation. Lots of really good information. As we know, teaching goes well beyond just the academics. You know, they are a whole person that come with a myriad of issues and challenges. So this was really, really helpful information. Want to remind you all that we do have more presentations this afternoon, as well as some presentations tomorrow. So it's not too late to sign up. If there's something that piques your interest and you want to sign up, please go ahead and do that. A reminder that when I end the session, an evaluation will pop up. So please feel free to provide some feedback. And again, I want to thank you all for your participation, and especially to Kaylee for such a wonderful wealth of information. So thank you for sharing all those resources with us. So have a great rest of your day.
All right. Thanks, guys.